This is a short bite episode of Homeschool Together. Hello and welcome to Homeschool Together Short Bite Edition. We are following up from our, last week's episode where we talked about Evan Moore and the Skill Sharpeners. I'm going to talk a little bit today about the Kumon books. I mean, I think people have heard of this brand.
Right.
It's pretty popular. I think we even have a store just down the road from us.
Yeah, we haven't gotten a
Kumon
chance to be in there. We usually order ours online. But today we're going to be talking specifically about the Kumon My Book of Telling Time, Learning About Minutes, which is for ages 5, 6, 7. They always have, usually it's three ages, but sometimes it's 2 ages.
If you ever get a Kumon book, on the back of it, it has a nice like family tree of books where they
we appreciate.
I really recommend. Actually, I really appreciate this kind of family tree like.
Well, and let me see the path.
Exactly, yeah. And so they basically break it up from early learning, which is like tracing and amazing tracing, so basic skills, then goes right into this whole block that they call basic skills, and then math skills, and then verbal skills. And along that tree, you can enter in one of those 3 tranches in any way, and then attack as you finish one book, it flows into the next.
Right, it makes it really easy.
And they always have the ages indicated on the top right. This one's a 5, 6, 7. I think the prices on these are about $8. And again, it's about 100. About 100 pages long. This one, this one's a little
about,
shorter.
$7.60 right now on Amazon. So not really affordable. This is another one that
you can find these in thrift as well.
We often find them at thrift, you guys, and they have like. Sometimes they don't have any pages done at all, or they have like 1 page done. I have bought so many of these at thrift. It's amazing. Yeah. So this is another one that we are pulling into our morning basket.
Exactly.
We as we said on the last short bite, if you didn't catch it, we use workbooks in the morning as something to get our daughter's brain kind of started. Just, she's really fresh right after breakfast. We're still kind of taking care of the toddler, making sure that, she's got everything she needs and she's cleaned up from breakfast. She's usually sticky. And so we're dealing with that. And this is something our daughter can start on right away.
Yeah.
And we've really enjoyed this workbook. So we wanted to tell you all about it.
Absolutely. Within our Right Start Math, I think we've talked about it in the past. We're doing Right Start Math as our program. We just finished it, actually. It was really successful. We're going to be starting the next level here coming up. They did cover time as part of that. Also with our mathematical reasoning book that we're also doing in the morning that we've reviewed on our YouTube channel and I think on our curriculum series this past summer. Mm-hmm. We've also been doing that, and they're doing time in there as well. I've wanted to we had this book. I wanted to do a little bit more time telling with her because I just didn't feel like I was doing enough with her.
Well, the other programs they're covering it just like they're covering all these different topics, and it was nice to have a workbook that we knew was focused on this area.
Yeah, I think we've alluded in the past. We have a couple games for telling time. I think we have it upstairs.
We have an Ebu telling time game, and we do have a Melissa and Doug wooden clock, which is really nice and a great way of like quizzing your learner about what time it is.
Absolutely, and I like that. I've done that a few times with her. It's been tough to remember the hook to come back to it. With telling time. And with a lot of these type of skills-based activities, you got to keep coming back to it until they master it. And a lot of times I find I forget sometimes to continue to reinforce and come back on these skills-based subjects that are not necessarily a key point within a major curriculum like Right Start Math. Telling time is not the main driver of that curriculum.
Right.
So I found that using the morning basket and bringing in these little workbooks as part of a skills-based learning, it's just to be able to touch it on a regular basis, not every day. I tend to have like 4 workbooks that I'm using at any one time, and I tend to only use about 2 of them whenever I pull something out. So I'm constantly rotating them through. But I would when we were doing this telling time book, we were doing this maybe twice a week. Maybe sometimes 3 times a week. Maybe if I missed a day the previous week based on the cycle, I'd bring it in 3 times. Definitely something to hit on a couple week basis. And I really feel that she has a good basis right now of telling time. Now, do I think she's an expert in telling time? No, but she can tell me basically about the time it is and the o'clock. She'll hit the o'clock. She'll like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. She understands that. She can get the half hour and quarter hours as well. And really the bulk of that came from this book, being able to hit this on a daily basis. One downside of this book, it is horribly repetitive. And so if you do a lot of this book, it can really drag on the learner. So I found that limiting it to about a page, maybe a page and a half, which honestly takes about 2 or 3 minutes. Like, it's really not that long once your learner gets into it. Really limiting it. I noticed if she got really excited about the book and went on and did 3 or 4 pages, she started to, like, get her eyes crossed towards the end. There's a lot of repetition in this book. So if your learner is a little sensitive to that, you may want to consider about how much you're dialing into them, maybe 1 page at a time. And if it's, 80 pages, it's going to take you 80 sittings to do this. So you can really just spread that out every 3 days or something of that nature throughout the year. You can knock out one of these books, and hopefully by the end of it, they can tell time. Really nice about a couple things here. Writing the numbers, a lot of repetition on writing numbers. Really cool skill to learn. Also, having them write the same number over and over a lot of times is a way to reinforce what that number is.
Yeah, that number sense, always,
exactly.
Getting our child to be able to see the number and know what that is important. So this is another good way to reinforce that.
One thing I've noticed with a few of the Kumon books versus, like, say, an Evan Moore book, I lean more heavily towards the Evan Moore books because of the creativity on page to page. This book, I don't know how much creativity one company could do, with Telling Time. But there will be multiple pages that they'll be going through, and it'll be the same o'clock. It'll be like 2 o'clock. And all they'll be doing is writing the next 5 minutes on that 2 o'clock as it goes all the way around the clock.
I think that's good, though, because she can kind of go, okay, she's anticipating.
Yeah, the one thing I think they were driving home is 60. And it's like, here's all the numbers. The other thing of it, as instead of writing the numbers a lot of times, if your learner struggles for, like, the 10s, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, they're gonna get a lot of writing practice with those numbers. And something that I've been asking my learner to do is when they write that number, say the number, so that I can hear that they actually know what that number is.
Right, they know that's 40.
That's 40, or that's 33, or that's 32. That's been a big thing for me when she's doing a lot of these activities, whether it's writing words, doing sight words activities, or doing number activities. What you're writing, say it, so that you don't get into the repetitious nature where you're just copying mindlessly. I want there to be a purpose, and I want there to be a recall built into that. That is something, that was one little wrinkle that I added into the book after the first few pages, because I noticed she was just kind of going with the flow and not really thinking about what she was doing. I wanted her to think a little bit more, slow it down, think more. I think there was a little bit more retention there.
So how do you feel now that we've gotten to the end of this about how well our daughter can tell time?
Again, I think she can get the hours really well. She knows that's the minutes hand, that's the hours hand. She can get a good idea on what hour it is. She still struggles on the minutes, like the actual numbers of the minutes, because it's hard for her to see 10, 20, 30, 40, 50.
Yeah, this is all on an analog clock.
Yeah.
This is all analog stuff. So,
but they have you analyze an analog clock and actually write the digital time.
Yeah, and I think, if she really takes her time, I've seen her be able to say, okay, it's 7. Yeah. I could see her kind of counting. I think she can mostly figure it out. I think we're at the point now where we probably, having completed this book, need to just do reinforcement practice. Yeah.
The placement of the minutes hand around the clock, I think, is probably the most challenging thing about telling time. It's not necessarily the hours. It gets a little tricky with hours, and I liked how this book approached it, where you're, the minutes hand is so, they'll be up in the 50s, right? And so the hours hand looks like it's pointed at 3, but it's still 2 o'clock. And I really had to reinforce that. And I think at the end, she kind of got that. It is not the next hour until it gets all the way up to the top. And so I think she really gets that. So she always knows it's the previous, whatever it's pointing at, it's the previous hour that it could have been pointed to. The minutes, I think, is the sticking point. I think it's one of the hard things. I don't know if she got that leaving this book. I think she understands that it goes all the way up to 60, but looking at the clock, looking at the minutes hand, it's pointed at the 3. I don't necessarily know that she thinks that's the 15.
Yeah, she's still kind of counting by fives. And I think that, certainly it isn't that our child can tell time when we finish this book, but
she's familiar with time.
I think everything was there. It's funny. This book says 5, 6, 7. Our daughter's now 6, just a newly 6. I feel like if we'd started this when she turned 6 rather than, 6 months ago,
Yeah.
maybe she would have a better appreciation for it, because I think your number sense has to be to a certain level to, she's done all the exercises in this book and she did well at it, but she can't look at the clock on the wall above the mantle and tell me what time it is with much confidence. So
I think if there's a second version of this book, or if I got it again and had her go through it, or if I maybe, now that I've left this, I go to one of those games that you were talking about, the Melissa and Doug or the Telling Time game, I think that would help reinforce that.
I think we're at this really reinforcement stage. I think this is a really good foundational book.
Mm-hmm.
If you want a book that includes lots of practice on and showing how to tell time, this is great. But I don't think that you're going to finish this book and your kid will be able to tell time. Unless maybe your child is older. If you've got a 6-7-year-old when you start this book, potentially they're going to be at a different place with their math skills. But I think with our daughter's math skills, she's not as confident at this point doing all the counting by fives. And I mean, she knows how to do it, but I think the confidence isn't really there.
I wish they would have done a little bit more counting by fives, counting by tens, and associating that with numbers on the clock. I think that might have been a little bit more helpful. I think if you're going to do this, you may need to bring that in a little bit more, maybe for your learner. Maybe keep that in your, in the back of your mind when they are going through this, that maybe you need to reinforce a little bit more the fives and the tens, especially if you're kind of in that range with your learner. Other than that, I mean, for $8, something to toss into the morning basket.
I think it's great. I think it's great to have something that specifically focuses on telling time so that it doesn't get missed, because there are some curriculums that don't, cover an analog clock.
Yeah.
So I think it's really good to have, but it's not the be all and end all. So, but overall, I think for the price, I think it's worth it.
And I go back to it. It's something that I would not have a trigger to remember to teach it. Having it in the morning basket as something to do or something to pull out periodically really allows me that opportunity to remember to pull that in, to do that. Like these basic skills that I think sometimes we as homeschool parents who are really focused on the learning to read and learning to do math will sometimes overlook these little simple skills that help us on our day-to-day, help our learners become, more well-developed, well-rounded kids on these early years. I think something like this is really helpful. I really appreciate the idea of a workbook being that trigger to help you remember to do things. And I think the way they present it now, like everyone listening to this, you can easily go out and teach your child how to do telling time. I mean, you can pull the resources together. You can look at the clock. You can say what time it is. You can have them do all these things. But having the repeated reminder of the workbook in the morning basket, and I'm pulling this out periodically, was a really nice hook for me to remember to do that. Would I recommend the Kumon book? Yes, if it's there. I would just recommend you getting a Telling Time book, but this Kumon book was pretty good. I enjoyed it. There was, again, the repetitive nature of the telling the time maybe could have been fixed a little bit. I would like to see more 5s and 10s, but that is only something that I'm recommending now, and I did not realize that going into it. So it's like coming out of it, I would say, okay, I would like to see something that
we would do this differently.
I would do this a slightly different with my 2-year-old.
I would definitely, for $7.50, I'd buy this book again for our 2-year-old when she is at the appropriate age, and like you say, add in the 5s and 10s. So I think this gets a recommendation from us, just based on content, quality, and cost. But if you have another resource for telling time that you love, hit us up, let us know. We're still open to suggestions.
Absolutely. So anyway, the Kumon, my book of telling time, learning about minutes, 5, 6, 7. We would recommend this somewhere in probably the 6 range. $8, really worth it. Put it in your morning basket. I think it's worth your time.
Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time,
happy homeschooling!